But yeah, but she played in the band till she was 91.
Carrie, we're starting.
Okay.
Call this meeting to order, the Planning and Zoning Workshop for July 23rd, 2026 at 10:31 p.m. Roll call: Bateson, Foster, Harwood, Slater, Summer, Commissioner, and Bowles are present. Commissioner James is absent. Community Development staff in attendance is Community Development Director Mike Beharry, Planning Manager Ben Tarbutton, Administrative Secretary Jocelyn Henning, Administrative Manager Reba Gritness, and Deputy Director of Operations Craig Davidson. Also in attendance online is Aaron Qualls from SCJ Alliance. So we'll go to changes to the agenda. Are there any changes? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the June 25th, 2026 public hearing and workshop minutes. Are there any changes to those minutes? Okay, hearing none, have a motion to approve the workshop minutes as written.
I will.
And second? So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I don't think we have any other business to attend to, so we'll go straight to the workshop. Up first is Aaron for the comprehensive plan update.
Hello, I can't see anybody out there. Can you see me?
We can see you.
Hold on, Aaron, we can't hear you very well.
Can you give us a sound check, Aaron?
Let me put on my headset.
Sound check.
Can you just give us a sound level?
Okay, how about now?
Yeah, these are not gonna do it. Well, let's try a different set of speakers here, Aaron, real quick.
Okay.
Let's see.
The speakers aren't working. I don't have a different kind.
That one, that's better.
Yeah,
It's definitely better.
Yeah. All right, let's try that.
Hello, testing, testing.
Yes.
Yeah, that works.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Okay. Well, very good. I just want to give a quick update on the final survey results. I'll share, I just have a kind of key findings, couple of slides to show you, and we can dive in more. I'm assuming everybody received the summary document?
Yes.
Yes.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
And Aaron, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, I think you have the ability to do so. So just go ahead and, there you go.
Okay. Here, we'll just kind of bring this up. So these are our total responses and responses over time. We did pretty good, almost 2,000 respondents. Some fully submitted, but they still captured results, some completely submitted. And so pretty good numbers from the survey. That said, we also asked who responded, and most were from in the county's jurisdiction, about 2/3. Vast majority of property owners, 94%, and most were older and without children. So that's a bit of a gap, and I think that, you know, probably is most important when we look, as we work through the Parks and Waterways plan, and consider that, you know, when we look at parks improvements. But key takeaways for managing growth, and this is probably doesn't come as a big surprise, and it's not too different from what we heard before. Transportation and loss of open space and farmland, some of the key issues. There seems to be, among those who responded, a willingness to get ahead in planning documents to make sure that growth is managed appropriately, whether it means ensuring that costs are taking it into consideration for new infrastructure or standards in place for infrastructure to support new growth, and zoning and development regulations to encourage or even require the preservation of open space where appropriate. And then I'll give you a brief overview of parks and waterways. No big surprise. Many folks thought that it was fundamental to the county's identity and a strong desire to protect, natural resources, including working lands, which kind of bleeds into open spaces. A lot of support among those who responded for hiking trails and multi-use pathways. I just sent to print a map that we're going to be providing at the future engagement events here in Worley and Harrison, which we're preparing for. A map that shows potential, existing trails and pathways, where gaps are and where there might be potentials to dramatically expand trails and pathways throughout the county. And I can bring that up and give you guys a preview of that if you're interested in seeing it. Some areas were identified as being overcrowded, mostly around the cities, we think, which some are county maintained, and certainly a lot of input on waterways too, which is a big part of what the Parks and Waterways Department does. This is a board here. I kind of skipped over it real quick, kind of an overall summary that we're taking to the next round of events, and that will be Worley and Harrison this weekend. So that's kind of a summary. I can bring up the more detailed results and answer any questions about that, assuming you've all had a chance to look at it. Let me just find that and bring it up here. Were there any areas of the survey or the feedback we've received thus far that anyone has any questions about or would like to dive in deeper about?
Since how the responses were skewed older, is there any way that we can, moving forward, get get to people, younger families with kids, so we can get some feedback from them? Is that a possibility? Is it too late? Are there any ideas of how to do that?
Yeah, we did, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we did hand out flyers at certain popular destinations for families and also some recreation areas. We haven't, crafted a, youth survey or a survey specific to families. Sometimes school districts can be allies for that. We'd have to kind of recraft a different survey, if it was specific to the youth, and ensure that it was ensure that the school district would be willing to. Those are a couple of ideas.
Do you think that would be worthwhile? Or is the feedback we have already sufficient?
Well, it certainly is for a lot of areas regarding I would say a lot of, it's useful for considering the broader comp plan issues around growth, housing, land use. But for parks and recreation, I would say, yeah, there was a youth voice lacking. And, one of the big questions is, well, should there be, things like playgrounds, things more tailored to youth activities? And are there gaps there? And that's more on the, parks plan side, but I'd say that's probably, that might be worth some targeted outreach. We haven't, decided on how or if to do that. With the budget we have is, in consideration the timeline that we're, trying to stick to. But it's something we can explore further, with Nick and, Mike and Ben.
Well, Mike and Ben, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this? 'Cause
I think it's definitely important to get the youth involved and trying to get their input. I know we have the 2 activities planned coming up for this weekend. We are gonna be out the fair for 9 days, so we're gonna try to capture a lot of the youth there. We're having a booth there from August 21st through the 30th. Ben and his team will be out there rotating in and out, working our booth, trying to gather input from everybody there, so. And we could possibly reach out to the school district, or several, and maybe we get a teacher or a class to maybe participate in a survey as an assignment, possibly.
Well, I'm thinking more, like the parents of, the adults, but younger families, where their kids are still at home and school and all of that. That's the only thing that kind of, I think this is just such excellent work.
Yeah.
But it was the only thing, it just seems so skewed to my demographic, and I'm glad to have my voice heard.
Yeah.
Certainly. But it,
Yeah.
we're also here responsible to, make everybody happy if at all possible. And so it just seemed like that was, I'd like to hear from them.
Yeah, we did send out all these notifications to all demographics, and usually the people that respond are in this age group.
Right, because we
does
have the
respond.
time
Right.
to do it,
And
everybody
there are
else
2
is
important things.
busy.
They're busy
Yeah.
with other activities,
Right,
and like
yes.
this doesn't, and we don't get that much participation from that age
But
group.
the fair would
I think
be-
the fair is gonna be a great opportunity for us to
Yeah.
capture that.
Yeah.
We had one test bed at Spirit Lake, and we got pretty good response, and a lot of integrated concerns were given by younger age groups and things like that. So
We
I
could
think
have-
these community projects that SCJ, Mike, and Ben have planned, that's gonna net some really positive results for those targeted groups that you're concerned with.
Yeah.
On your parkways that you have, when I go by those, probably 75 to 90% of the cars are all out of state. I mean, so, I'm serious, they are,
Yeah.
and so they're coming over, and they're probably not filling this out. I mean, they're not looking at this, I don't think, but they're hitting the campgrounds and stuff, hiking to Mineral Ridge and all that stuff.
Right.
They're all Washington,
That actually
Oregon plates.
brings up a topic is like, okay, well, we're doing this for us. They're using it, but, I mean, this is, so is that,
And the county taxpayers are.
Paying for it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why your BOLS, things like that, look at enhanced fees for out-of-state
yeah.
visitors and
It's
things
like
like
the
that.
boat dock, Third Street dock. You go down there and
Watching plates.
I've heard so many complaints about that. People are so frustrated, they're living here and paying their taxes and they can't get a spot.
I know people from here that drive up to Sandpoint and go to Ponderay because they can't even get on the lake here. They can't find a place to park, they can't find a place to dock their boat or to unload their boat, let alone. So,
Can you hear us, Aaron, or not?
Yes, you're a little muffled, but I
Okay.
can hear, and what
Okay.
I'm hearing is kind of confirming what we've heard in the survey results. Certain boat launches are a bit impactful, and I brought up this map to show where some primarily from the survey responses, areas where we may consider improvements. This is the map that I was just on the phone with Nick before this meeting, and who gave the nod of approval to go ahead and start presenting this. But it identifies some areas, such as Lake, where the north end potential boat launch that was getting a lot of pressure in Hayden Lake. And then potentially on the west side, somewhere on Lake Coeur d'Alene, another potential boat launch site not, neither one has a specific location designated yet, but that's kind of where we're at based on the survey results and what we want to present and maybe get some feedback on. And then other like park amenities, while I'm on here, is Hauser Lake. The park there's actually owned by Fish and Wildlife, but maintained by the county. So we'll take some interlocal agreements for improvements there. But the first thought was potentially sports courts, which we did not hear a lot of demand for in the survey. But still potential upgrade playground is something that we may consider concepting for in the next as we get more detailed in the planning process. I think what's most significant is the demand for trails and pathway extensions. So we took a holistic view of all the existing trails, including the Trail of the Coeur d'Alenes, as well as the Centennial Trail, and looked for opportunities to connect with those and also to connect places. So there's a few new potential trail proposals, and I know there's been some history and work done on some of these, but a potential trail expansion all the way up to Spirit Lake and all the way over to Bayview. And then from Post Falls over to Hayden Lake, where we've heard some boat launch pressure, and there's some trail connectivity here, and we take a partnership with the city of Hayden, of course, and that also connects with the existing Centennial Trail up north on Highway 95. And then the most ambitious one was from Harrison all the way connecting to the Trail of the Coeur d'Alenes, and then potentially up to the Centennial Trail as well, all along this edge. But it's certainly not designed, just a potential idea for a new connection. But again, very ambitious.
This is Terry, has any thing been thought about maybe checking in just with the other agencies as far as access to the Chain Lakes area and all of that? Because I know that when the lake was busy and we used to water ski, we'd go up to one of the chain lakes and water ski because we didn't have to put up with the traffic on Coeur d'Alene Lake. But and of course, those other agencies, the Forest Service and the state and the tribe, have got some facilities up that way. But I don't know if we want to integrate that into anything for Kootenai County, at least to identify them maybe in the plan. But I mean, there are other agency responsibilities, so you may not want to bother with that. But
Right.
But
Well,
what their big drive now, of course, is to clean up those areas from the contaminated sediments so that they're safe for people to use, like Rainy Hill and some of those, Rose Lake boat ramp and that one there. I tested that one time. I had 6,000 parts per million lead in the sediment right there. Level
Right.
0. So I just wonder,
Yeah, no, that's a good thought. And yeah, I mean, certainly interagency agreements is not a new concept for managing parks and waterways in Kootenai County and trails. So that is something to explore. I want to say in an earlier version, we did look for an opportunity, maybe at Black Lake, for maybe a potential more open space, or because based on survey responses of just finding a quiet place away, as you just kind of articulated, is also in demand. So that's something we also kind of zeroed in, but it's not shown here necessarily. I think I cautioned about it because I wasn't sure of the contamination level, while we were putting this together, and something I know, Ben, you're familiar with, and I think you have that pretty well mapped. And Mike, I know that you look at that when anybody looks to develop out in that area.
Well, I think the
But
thing
yeah.
about, I think the thing about it is if you folks decided you wanted to look into developing an area like that, I think the folks with the Superfund project would emphasize that area, and that's what they're doing now. It's 18,000 acres of contaminated wetlands, the whole lower basin is, but they're concentrating on where you have a lot of activity, you know, for developed human
Right.
activity, not dispersed human activity, yeah.
Right.
Anything else for Aaron?
And I was just gonna maybe add on to that. This weekend, we've got an event in Harrison that we're gonna be participating in. And so that would be an opportunity for us to hear of interest, not only from a different demographic, hopefully too, but just specifically, like geographically within that area, where they may wanna see some other areas of either
Harrison
trails
is-
or
It's
public
a
spaces.
different county, right?
No,
No.
No,
it's in
Harrison, it's
Kootenai.
Kootenai County.
Oh, it is. I thought it was, oh, okay.
Now, we did clean up the beaches at Harrison, but then we've had to monitor them because of the continued contamination coming down the main river, you know, in high water, so you get recontamination, but there was a big push, you know, so many years ago to clean all of the beaches up at Harrison, no matter who owned them or operated them or whatever, so.
So up until this point, you have done activities in Worley and Spirit Lake.
Just Spirit Lake, we haven't
Just
done
Spirit
Worley
Lake.
yet. Worley is also this weekend.
Okay,
Just two.
and then are you planning on going to the other incorporated areas, like trying to hit all of them? Or are you spot checking ones that you think are maybe
Yeah.
a little more?
We try to focus on areas that are more of the county, rather than focusing on just within the city and getting voices from the cities.
Okay,
Again, while those are cities, of course, but we
Right.
hopefully gather some different voices when they have a community event. They're more likely kind of to participate in that
Sure.
community event. And so we're hoping to get more voices, more from the unincorporated areas. But, yeah, we've checked with some different cities, looked at some of the different community events that they have, and these seem to be kind of geographically ideal. So that's kind of why we focused on those.
especially like over the month of July, all, you know, Raptor, Post Falls, Hayden, Coeur d'Alene, they have their, you know, 4th of July parades, their Raptor days, their Post
Mhm.
Falls days, where there's a lot of people coming out to the parades and activities within those, now they're cities, right? But you know, not just city people go to those, so I didn't know if you were trying to get to any of those.
You know, we're, again, looking at the fair as part of that too, and so we were hopefully focusing on those as some key events, but certainly,
you're
we
limited.
we could certainly look at those other days. I don't know, they're mostly in July.
They're
Hayden
almost
Days
all
starts
in
tomorrow.
July.
Yeah.
Hayden Days is the last one, and it's also this weekend.
Yeah, so we were
So-
trying to kind of like, how do we make all of this work? And,
Yeah.
Yeah, there are certain weekends that seem to be popular with people.
Okay. Any other questions,
Um,
Aaron? Go ahead, Aaron, or Mike.
I was wondering if you could bring up the survey question, the PDF, and go over the growth and land use priority questions, if you had a few minutes for that.
Yes. that's-
Certainly.
I think it starts at question 3.
Right. Starting with question 3, or
4, 5.
I think. Or question 4, about experience the most strain from population growth.
Yeah,
starting
4 and
here.
5 would be great, yeah.
And priorities for planning for growth.
Mhm.
I do have charts for this. I didn't get them in a PowerPoint though. See, I mean, graphs. But we can provide that, you know, in the plan, or I can pull them up and show you. But this tells you the raw numbers. So So most people concerned about transportation and farmland as the biggest strains from growth here. And then followed by housing and then water quality and supply. And then, preserving working lands was the, pretty far in the lead for the top priority for planning and addressing growth. And as you saw from the map that I had up earlier, the open space preference for preservation was primarily within the prairie, which may align with aquifer protection goals and policies and sensitive aquifer recharge areas. So we're kind of looking at that in tandem. And then second, of course, protecting water quality and quantity. So we're getting some clear direction on what to prioritize for the goals and policies. And we've started with the aquifer. Maybe we can come back to that if time allows. And then strong support for making sure that new development pays its fair share of infrastructure and service costs, and the types of policies that this may lead to could be, fees for new development, but also standards to ensure that, resulting parcels are serviceable through your subdivision and short plat ordinances.
So in looking at these, when I was analyzing these responses, there seems to be a real tension, and I'm wondering if I'm reading them right, that when you sort of amalgamate all of it, it seems that the bulk of the folks in the county want it to be small townish, rural, open space, farmland, those types of things, good water quality and so forth. On the other hand, what's also high on the list is the need for housing and, building affordable housing. And we've heard that theme for a long time. And so if I'm reading this right, it seems to me the challenge is to find a way to navigate those two, because they could be in conflict, right? Because one way to make affordable housing is pave everything like they did when I was a little boy in the Santa Clara Valley. I grew up in the Santa Clara Valley. It's now called the Silicon Valley. When I was a little boy, it was cherry orchards and plum orchards. It was the prune capital of the world, And I was known as a prune picker among my cousins because I came from there. I go back now. I don't recognize it. It's wall to wall cement, and I think a lot of people have escaped that come here. But and maybe I'm overstating this, but I kind of don't think so. I think that's a real challenge, and I don't think it's impossible. I mean, I used to live in France, and because I'm French, my mom's side, first generation, and there's many areas there where they have, villages and towns that have really dense housing that is affordable, but they keep the open spaces open. And so, I mean, so not to pick cultures against each other, but, in the US, we kind of just have this notion of expansion, build. Well, I think we're experiencing, probably a lot of communities are experiencing, is that you're running out of resource to consume, and now you have to manage the resource and figure out how to do it. And I really do think, I maybe I'm seeing it through the lens of being alive right now, but I really do think we're particularly in this county, for the long time I've been here, I've seen it kind of coming to a crescendo, and I think we're getting to that right now. I really do. And that's partly why I volunteered to do this work here, because I think it's really important to navigate that. And I think we can. I think we can have affordable housing and available housing and so forth, and at the same time preserve open spaces. So anyway, I don't know that I'm contributing much here, but that's sort of where I'm coming from, and I'd like to know from you if you think I'm wrong, if I should look at it differently.
And what you're describing is kind of long-standing good planning practice, not that it has always been practiced that way. And, you've also described one of the very purposes of the local land use planning act in Idaho, which is to essentially direct growth and density into cities, which is where more infrastructure and services are readily available and where more affordable housing may be more appropriate. And so there's priorities of cities for economic development and fiscal resiliency, and there's priorities of counties for preservation of open lands and working lands, and they do not necessarily have to be in conflict. Sometimes conflicts arise through that, but it's there's certainly cities allowing more opportunity for growth and development. We've seen that recently through the legislature with, for example, the ADU bill and the starter home subdivision, and another bill that makes it easier to build, more multifamily without additional staircases. So there's certainly a direction by the legislature to provide more opportunities for more infill development within cities to handle population growth, which I don't think competes at all with the goals of what we've heard so far from Kootenai County residents to preserve, some measure of open space in the county. And from a kind of urban design perspective, it can better clearly define a place where, if you remember one of the previous analysis we did with GIS showing, what could happen at some point is that the entire urban area of Kootenai County could just become all connected, as it has in places like California.
Yeah, I don't.
Absent some change in, planning and implementation standards and zoning.
I don't know if this, hopefully this is relevant. I have a son who is helping a community with this very issue of how to have denser housing without disturbing the open spaces. And, there's those creative things that they're doing. One of them was, in this particular community, you could only have one house on a lot of a given size, and they changed the ordinances to allow for they call it a grandparent's home, a certain size home that you can put in the backyard. They even have these little tiny ones now. I see them pop up on my news feeds, kind of funny. But and then also changing the requirements for the number of vehicles that are parking spots that you need in conjunction with increasing public transit to get people to use public transit more than eating up ground with parking lots. And I just wonder if there's things we can do here creatively to sort of address the problem of building, consuming the open areas. I mean, down with me, I'm at Fighting Creek area down on South Bay Road, and boy, during the COVID, I mean, it was like a land rush down there. People were coming down. I mean, I got a farm, and the land was worth about $5,000 an acre. Now if you buy a 20-acre parcel, it's $500,000 or more. You can't farm with those prices. It's chasing all the farmers out, and then the farmers get chased out, or they sell out, and why not? Because they can make a lot of money, and that created that whole brouhaha that we had down there. That's a classic problem that arises from this development in conflict with the open spaces. So anyway.
I think where the conflict would arise is between property rights and preservation efforts, either through zoning or incentives. Not so much incentives, but if a future land use map and implementing zoning sought to preserve and prevent smaller lot subdivisions in areas deemed more appropriate for preserving working lands and open space, it would have may have significant financial impacts on certain property owners.
Well, that's the classic clash between where individual rights collide with each other and collective rights. I talked about this before, you have a community, just look at it purely through an economic lens, a lot of money comes into this county because of the open spaces, because of the beauty of it. I was just talking about a guy back in, I don't know where it was, Toledo or someplace, when he heard where I lived, he's like, oh gosh, I love that place, I've been there. And so while you can look through the narrow lens that the property rights of an individual to sell their property, subdivide it, and make more money, and the developer who can make more money developing it, I think we're getting to a point where that narrow analysis has to be broadened. You have to look at the effect on the entire community, water quality, all these things that we've been talking about. And what we do in this committee and ultimately what the county does is they do draw bright lines and they do affect people's rights for the collective good or for the individual good. They have to draw those lines. So I just see that as a challenge to take on. It's the reality.
Well, one of the things we've done in the lower basin, there's a lot of, years ago, they diked off the creeks and they diked off the river and they farmed it. And if you folks have been up Trail of the Coeur d'Alenes recently, what we've done is we've got these various organizations that purchase conservation easements. Now, the landowner still owns the land, but they get paid a pretty healthy price for it, and, they're in the process right now of converting 500 acres and 750 acres into clean wetlands for the migratory waterfowl, because we're killing the geese and the swans off down there because they're getting into the contaminated sediments. And so they've done a number of those things. I was just wondering, the same type of process could be used to set aside some of the open areas, say even on the prairie, by purchasing an easement rather than you just buying the property outright. But I don't know if the values have gone so high. I paid $42,000 for the lot that my house sits on in 1995. Those lots are selling for almost $400,000 now for 5 acres. It's just crazy. So I don't know if a landowner would, how much these conservation organizations, they come and make presentations at my 4 counties meetings, and they are in the process, especially over in Spokane County, they're buying up some of those types of conservation easements over there, I know. So,
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah,
The county that's a great idea. I didn't even dawn on me because I worked with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation on the easement up north, north of Sandpoint, and boy, they got money and they'll pay for it. If you have good, I've even thought about my place if, if my kids aren't gonna inherit the farm and come back, I might just try to do that because we have a ton of elk and their habitat's being eaten up by the developments going in around us. I think if the county targeted organization, but I think that'd be great, to be able to, choose where we think we should have those, right? And then target organizations, if it's wetlands, Ducks Unlimited, elk, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
It depends on where you're at too, though, because like on the prairie, one of those foundations, most of those foundations aren't gonna do anything because they don't have any game or anything or any forest. So, but like up north where you were talking about helping out, where they're in the woods and they've got game and stuff, they jump on those.
Yeah.
But then again, it's also on the property owner. They don't have kids anymore. They're all grown up and they don't want to farm. So they're looking at all these dollars these developers will give them or put it in the easement. Some people are still putting them into an easement like that. But you're looking at all that money, you can't really blame them. You hate to see them do it, but you can't blame them for it.
No,
Because they can't farm it.
But if you could, if the county could somehow encourage folks or if there's county land that we could put into an easement, but encourage folks in some way to do that. That's kind of the creative thinking. I'm thinking, find ways that's a win-win for everybody. I'm thinking on the prairie, pheasants forever. There used to be a lot of pheasants out in the prairie.
I haven't had a pheasant on my place for 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah,
Quail, but no pheasants anymore. Used to have them all the time.
Yeah.
A question that I have is, what is the commission or planning, how are we envisioning open space and working lands. Is open space and working lands like the traditional, you know, development with, you know, a whole big neighborhood with lots of homes on it, on small lots, and then the open space is a park here or a school or something there. And I get it, working lands would be farming and, you know, ag type of stuff, but the question that I'm having here is, are we considering, you know, that kind of traditional suburban model that we're seeing in the prairie, I think right now, as far as development goes, or are we actually seeing more of like, especially with regard to the conversation about Parks and Rec, you know, like, or conservation pieces, where there would be these really, really large tracts of land that would be reserved for no development, but then kind of just surrounded by, you know, either suburban development or higher density development. Like, what are we actually seeing? Like, I'm questioning what open space and working lands actually means and what we think it actually looks like in the future.
Aaron, you want to start off with that one? And then we'll go into question 10, because question 10 kind of shows what the county's looking at as far as lot sizes. What are the people saying, what are the lot sizes we want in the unincorporated areas?
Right.
And our comp plan is going to be based on the unincorporated areas. The cities are going to do these high-density neighborhoods with these pocket parks and stuff like that. In the county, we are on well and septic systems, on large lots. We don't have these subdivisions that you're talking about.
Okay.
They're all in the city with city sewer and water.
Okay.
So a lot of this comp plan, the majority of it is going to be based on these larger lots and what the people want for in the unincorporated areas. Do we want to keep it large lots? Do we want smaller lots? We also have an opportunity for conservation subdivisions, which is part of that rural cluster developments, which is on question 10. And Eric can go a little bit more into detail on that, but that takes into account the overall density, the overall size of the lot, instead of putting houses and they take all that density and they put it in one little area, and the remainder is left in open space. So that cluster type rural conservation subdivisions would be something that the county would be looking at more of than these subdivisions with the concrete streets, sidewalks, and sewer and water services. So,
Okay.
Is that like a village type concept where you have,
the conservation subdivision?
yeah, that you have sort of like a village here, village there, and open space?
I don't know if it would be necessarily a village, but you would cluster the density in a certain location in the property, and the remainder would remain in open space. And that would be part of the planning process, and it would say, this is an open space, tract A is an open space reserved for open space.
Is
The
that
lots
what
would be allowed to be smaller in those conservation subdivisions.
Okay.
But that's what, isn't that what, where Post Falls and Rathrum, everybody, they're incorporating and going out and, I mean, they're taking away all the stuff that we're doing. They
Right.
just annex them in and.
Right.
They have,
And then they do what they
About
want,
annexation, yeah.
you know. and
they have their
it's-
comprehensive plans, and their plans dictate, you know, this will be subdivisions, and they go out into the county, and they project out what they want to annex in. And
They've got them on water regulations already, but yet they just keep building and, you
Right,
know.
so
taking
I don't know
more.
how that could be stopped in a county perspective.
With regard to open space that's set aside either in like a cluster type development with a conservation open space piece, would that conservation area be open to the public? Or is it still considered private property and under control?
That
or-
That could be both ways, it depends on what
Yeah,
the
yeah.
PUD and what the conservation subdivision, it could be limited just to that subdivision, or it could be open to the public, and that would go through the planning process, the public hearing process, so.
Then it'd have to be with the.
And Aaron's got a great
They'd have to
map
be
of
in
what a
the contract,
conservation.
yeah.
Can you go over that for us, Aaron?
Yeah.
What's that?
Could you go over those images for us?
Yeah, and I just Googled this. There's lots of examples if you just Google it.
So,
But this is a pretty good one. So you can see what a typical subdivision would look like, right? Large lot subdivision, and then a clustered one, same amount of units, but with a preservation aspect to it. Now, I've seen some counties where there's a density bonus to this, right? So there's a real incentive to do it. And the way that open space can happen, as Mike said, can be in a variety of ways. It can be owned, by like a homeowner association here. It can be transferred to a community land trust, so it's open to everybody. It could just become public, but, always the question is, well, who's on the hook to maintain the open space, right? As part of these subdivisions, and that's just kind of like one of the, important details to consider. Now, there are lots of benefits, certainly the community benefit of preserving open space and scenic vistas, et cetera, and habitat. There are also, I think, can be fire mitigation benefits as well, if designed appropriately. And yeah, so there's lots of information about these, and I know that Kootenai County does have that, and my understanding, Ben and Mike, is there's not been a whole lot of folks that have taken advantage of it. That might be something to look at or turn the knobs on to better incentivize.
Yeah, I think that yes, we do have a conservation design subdivision provision in our code, but the incentives are not there.
They don't offset the market.
No, they don't. I mean, we used to have what Aaron was talking about, a bonus density, which essentially gave them availability for more lots than what the just standard ratio of minimum lot size would allow. That's been removed, and it's probably been, I don't know, 10, 15 years since we've removed that. So if there isn't an incentive for somebody to have a conservation design, because most people, they're gonna look at conservation design only for the areas which are really undevelopable anyways. And so they're like, well, we don't wanna put a road through this steep slope, so we'll call it a conservation design. But the problem is that there aren't any organizations, because right now we are looking at just conservation organizations is what the code says. No conservation organization wants that kind of a area. And so there's just no interest, there's no incentive, and so people typically just do not propose conservation design. So I think that is one thing that we should be doing as we start to develop some of our land use codes, is to create more incentive for conservation design, so that we have what maybe a little bit the option of the the image on the right, and then it makes it palatable for developers.
What kind of incentives, a tax or what else?
Yeah,
Bonus density, so you get more lots if you do a conservation design.
Lower units.
More units than you would in the traditional one lot per 5 acre, or one dwelling unit per 5 acres. Instead of that ratio, you get whatever extra bonus densities for how much land you're conserving.
But one of the keys to this thing is, and you've been touching on it, is that, the government, whichever government it is, has got to be willing to come up with enough funding to maintain those properties. I think that's one of the problems. Whether or not you can get, I mean, in some cases, these conservation easements I'm talking about, you get, like you say, Save the Whales, or somebody comes forward and agrees to maintain it, some private thing. But in many cases, like the ones I'm talking about for the fly zone and all that, those are gonna be maintained by, Idaho Fish and Game and government agencies of some kind. But you gotta be willing to come forward with the funding to maintain them, and you gotta be willing to tax the people to come up with the funds to maintain them. So all of these things are pretty tough issues.
My question is, like on the conservation subdivision we've got on the right there, on those, well, I got a couple of questions. First, all that open space, does the county lose taxes on that? And also, if you're in that cluster like that, are they required to put in a sewer project, or are they all on? Where's the water and sewer on?
Good questions. Go ahead, Ben.
I was gonna say, I don't know enough about the tax base, whether or not how that would affect the taxes. That would be more of an assessor's question. Maybe somebody else has some input on that, but with regards to the infrastructure, when you start clustering development like that, it is very possible that that's gonna require some kind of water system or sewer system, which can be challenging. I mean, part of the reason we see a lot of these 5-acre developments is because it's really easy to divide have a subdivision with that kind of proposal. People have your own septic, your own well, we'll build the road for you, but otherwise you're on your own. And that's pretty easy to divide and sell out. So it definitely takes a little bit more forethought and investment for.
Yeah, on the 5-acre piece, but if you get that small cluster one, they're like,
They need a community system.
They do?
They'd have to install some kind of community well and community septic system for all these to use.
okay.
Yeah. And that was getting at, that is kind of expensive and challenging to
Yeah.
do, and where do you locate that?
But so Ben, you're saying it's more economic generally for the developer just to do the 5 acres.
Build the
along
roads,
way,
sell them off, and let the
Than
person.
the cluster them.
Yeah,
So that, yeah, you'd have to offset that economic disincentive.
and that's where the bonus lots arguably would probably balance that out.
Is there an example?
If I may,
Sorry.
oh no, I was just gonna try to piggyback off of the tax question. And it depends, is always the answer, right? But it's, if it's a community land trust, they still pay taxes. I think it might be a reduced rate depending on the covenants in place. If it's owned by, for example, a homeowner association, they would still pay taxes. Of course, without improvements on that parcel, the taxes would be less. Certainly the improvements on the individual lots within the clustered area, they, would be more with the improvements. The other thing to consider is the other side of the coin to revenue gain is the service costs. And if you look at the conservation, if you look at the typical subdivision on the left, look at how many roads, how much more roadway that is to maintain versus the one on the right. And that's always an important consideration for different, land use and development patterns, is what are the taxpayers inheriting to maintain in perpetuity? How much roadway, how much pipe in certain, that's not so much in the county, but in cities, for example, water and sewer lines, as long as roadways to maintain versus a different type of development pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one of the challenges too that we've heard from developers is that it's extremely long process for public water systems to get approved through the state. And so it's just easier for them to just not even deal with it because they go through a 2-year process, still working through the process, and it's really expensive to develop your own public water system. They would rather just build the roads and not have to worry about approval from the state side.
When they build the roads, we just went over the road thing here a couple sessions ago. When they build those subdivisions, do those roads all have to be to the standards that we talked about earlier as far as the fire and, so
Yeah.
they've gotta be up to the width and everything like that?
Well, yeah, the roads themselves eat up more land,
Yeah.
pave over more land, but
Oh, yeah.
what I'm hearing is we have all these disincentives to do the development on the right. So it's just not gonna happen unless we figure out how to incentivize
Right.
people. Developers do, because, and in fairness, to, the land rights and all that, you're always better with a carrot than a stick. If you can give people incentives, developers incentives to do a project that's better for the community, that's great, but how do we do that? Like the process, getting a community well, it sounds like it's, difficult with the county, with the city. Can the county influence that at all? Can it, or with the state? Can the county influence the state to process those quicker or something?
Well, getting a permit to drill a well isn't all that time consuming, but he was talking about public drinking water systems and the design of that and everything. And I manage a public drinking water system on a subdivision on the prairie.
Right.
And I'm a licensed professional engineer and I manage it and I have to meet all the state EPA and federal requirements for a public drinking water system. So you gotta have the HOA has to have an organization of some kind with experts to run the thing for them. Because what'll happen is the developer, after they sell so many properties, they'll turn the drinking water system over to the HOA. And that's the way the process is. And of course, everything else out there is on septic tanks and drain fields, but that's a public, and there's a number of public drinking water systems on the Rathrum Prairie, and some private firms have bought those now. There's one that's got over 300 connections out there now, public drinking water, and they just bought all these because the homeowners association got tired of trying to manage their own system, so. But I think the thing about all this is we're gonna have to get tough making some regulations and rules so that we can make some of these things happen. Because if we just let it go, like you say, there's no incentive to do anything other than to just carve it all up. And so, but are we gonna have the gumption to put together regulations like that start to squeeze a little bit on the private landowner versus the public needs? I don't know if we're gonna be able to do that.
If we don't, it's gonna happen the way it's gonna happen. I mean, development's gonna happen. The question is, do you wanna have some control and influence over it, or just let it happen? And I think up to now, it's been more just let it happen. Honestly.
We've had these policies and this zoning since 73 and 78, and nothing's changed really since that time.
Right.
And so what made sense in the 70s doesn't make sense today.
Right, and a classic example I keep bringing up is the minor subdivision ordinance, okay, that allows a developer to aggregate minor subdivisions into a major subdivision and skirt the subdivision laws. They're violating the law. I mean, it's pretty clear to me. I've analyzed it from a legal standpoint, but nobody calls them on it. And we don't change that ordinance. And I've been a voice over and over to say we gotta either get rid of it or really revamp it so it's used for what it should be used for. You know, for the small family or whatever, family situation, not a developers coming in and aggregating minor subdivisions into a major subdivision that doesn't meet the standards without notice and hearing with the neighbors and all of that. There's a due process issue, and there's also practical issues, the road size and the sewer maintenance and all that stuff. But we don't do anything about it. That's the problem.
Well, that's where,
And we need to.
where it goes into establishing levels of service.
Say again?
Where it goes into establishing levels of service and things like that. You get the metrics, and once you get the comp plan, you can drill down to those levels.
Right.
To your point about the serial minor subdivisions, you're exactly correct.
Yeah.
I know Aaron's got a limited time, he's gotta leave at 2:30. So I was wondering if you could go over question 10.
If I may, Madam Chair, Mike and Ben, I have these maps up here, I do have to jump off.
Okay.
I was gonna leave you with one thought, we can dive in this later, when the conversation, steered toward what land trust would be interested, or, how could this, be viable, either, preserving an open space or a, conservation area somehow. The map on the left is the final survey results for preserving open space. The map on the right is one that we created in partnership with the Land Trust and the Aquifer Protection District. And maybe something to kind of look at as we go down the road of future land use and potential, new zoning regulations, is to look at where there might be the most alignment. So we know where the recently mapped sensitive aquifer recharge areas are. That's these black squiggles here. We know where the local land trust in the Northwest Land Trust anyway, would be interested in entertaining some conservation easements. And then over on the left, we were hearing what respondents to our survey are asking for preservation. If there are areas that align all these three things, you have a pretty good solid foundation for establishing policy and regulations. And that's what we look for is, based on data, based on input, what makes the most sense going forward. We have to leave it with that and jump off and look forward to continue conversation and movement as we start to dive into, the real meat of the plan. And come out and see us.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ben, I have a quick question. So for you said it's already in the code for the cluster developments.
Yes.
What is the lot size?
It is, I can pull it up for you. I think it's either 14,000 square feet or, let me just close this out since we don't need the Zoom meeting anymore.
About a quarter of an acre.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head. Let me find it for you though.
43,560 square feet. Old surveyor.
And while Ben's looking up that, I will just kind of go over number 10 for you. What the people are saying on the survey, most housing types are most appropriate for the unincorporated rural areas. So almost 60% said they wanted to see large lots 5 to 10 acres. And then the other 55% wanted 10 acres or greater.
Wow.
So there's a huge amount for those lot sizes.
It's kind of maybe opposite the whole cluster idea. They're not wanting the smaller lot sizes, they're wanting larger lot sizes.
And that was kind of the part of my question about what does the open space actually look like?
Yeah.
Or the lower density? Does it look like apparently what the respondents want are 5 to 10 acre residential lots and 10+ acre farms? And it appears that that's what the market also wants, because it's not profitable to make these cluster or those types of developments for developers. And honestly, people move to North Idaho, not, from wherever it is they come from, they want to live on 5 to 10 acres. Or, that's why people, that's why people.
But as the cities, gobble these areas, they're not building those 5 and 10 acre.
Oh, not cities.
Yeah,
But if you're looking to not live in the city, you're probably more predisposed to want to live on 5 to 10+ acres.
I agree with that.
And
yeah.
that's
So-
really good until they've lived there for about 3 or 4 years, and they can't manage it.
Well, right.
Because
and
it's
then
not
they-
easy, right.
And then they sell, and
Yeah.
then somebody buys it at the new market price. So, it's just.
See, I don't think you can draw those conclusions from those responses, because they weren't given the opportunity to consider what we just saw.
Yeah.
Someone who says, I want to see 5 acre parcels, could be thinking yeah, I bet that's better than 1 acre parcels. So I'm gonna say 5 because I want more open space. So in order to answer that question, I think you have to ask a new question to them. And almost show them the picture and say, would you rather it be 5 acre parcels more than 10, or a cluster with open space?
It's on there. There's a
Yeah, we
response
also
on there.
have, 35% wanted these rural cluster developments. So if you look down on the fourth one down.
Yeah, so.
So that was high up there as well.
But I think a visual.
Well, I guess,
means a
okay,
lot.
fair enough,
Yeah.
yeah, I see that, yeah.
Yeah.
So that 8250, that's a typical city, normal, single-family lot size, correct?
Yeah, it's about 1/5 of an acre.
Yeah.
In
So
Coeur d'Alene
it's-
is 5,000.
Restricted residential.
Coeur d'Alene is
5,000 square foot. It's 50 by 100, 50 by 110.
So you're essentially you're mimicking a city.
Right.
Is the cluster is mimicking like a city development?
Yep.
That's with more open space.
And they're putting
As far as lot
everything in
size.
one little area.
Does anybody
Less
know-
roads.
When they did Dalton, the Dalton acre thing, how'd they come up with that, any idea?
The 2 acre minimum?
The 1
lot
acre
size?
minimum?
Minimum one, I'm not sure.
They've got, that's one of the highest tax bases in the state, is the Dalton acres.
Are they hooked to sewer and water, Ben, do you know?
No, I think they are on.
They have a community, don't they?
Yes, but I think they're on their own sewers,
Community water, but.
Community water, but
Possibly. They're doing they don't want no sidewalks, they don't want, that's,
Right.
they've been going through that.
And it's also one of the most attractive and desirable neighborhoods. in
It
the
is.
entire
It is.
Idaho. So,
right.
Yeah.
people will pay a premium to live there.
Well, I'm thinking too of Big Sky. I ride my bike out there, and those are all, what, 5 acres?
5 acre lots.
Right, and that does give you a sense, even though it's not open space, it's owned property, but it does give you a sense of open space. It doesn't feel so crowded in. So that's another thought too, that.
Well, part of that, you've got a bike path going right through the middle of it.
Correct.
You know, you got the gas
Which are-
pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, so.
Right, I don't do that though, I ride around.
But I mean, even on the 5 acre lots in my subdivision, and I've been the HOA president for 21 years, and the water system manager for 21 years, but a lot of those 5 acre properties, people are running horses on them, and they have, you know,
Yeah,
they
it feels
have.
open.
Yeah,
That's why they buy it.
and on the 10 acre properties, I've got folks, raising cattle, And so, I mean, it's an interesting area because they went ahead and put in a public drinking water system for 140 or 58, well, it's a quarter, 160 acre subdivision. And normally, they're, like you say, they're not, everybody's just drilling their own well, so you got all those wells, but, I don't know, it's, you gotta get some people willing to manage an HOA like that to have this cluster thing you're talking about, because if you can't find, I'm having a terrible time trying to palm it off on somebody. I'm 80 years old and I wanna get rid of it. I mean, I don't wanna have the responsibility anymore. And trying to get somebody else that's a member of that homeowners association of the 25 properties to take over, I've convinced them they need to hire a professional outfit company to manage the water system, thank God, But, I mean, just to get somebody to be president of the HOA is very
I
difficult.
think you're gonna be in a predicament like Post Falls is doing right now with their, they've got 2 or 3 different HOAs that are default.
They're broke, yeah, they haven't paid their bills.
And they're going after, trying to figure out how to go after them now for back, ownings.
Are there any examples of local cluster communities within the county? Or maybe in North Idaho, or any examples that?
Yeah, we could probably find some examples. I'm not aware of any in the county, but I think we could find some in the region, maybe, I don't know if it's in Idaho, maybe
I
Washington.
can't
or something.
think of any, but.
If you wanted some kind of an example.
Well, it's just an example of maybe when it went in, how it went, how it's going, how it appears it would be going in the future. Just, especially if it was maybe someplace in Idaho.
I could show you an example of a subdivision, this,
Okay, Brendan's aware.
um,
There we go.
Well, it's starting to sound to me like the cluster idea is really a pie in the sky idea that can never happen unless you can figure out the
How to incentivize it.
start with the infrastructure, the water,
Yeah.
probably sewer's gonna be next. And unless the county finds a way to, I'm just gonna make it up, so the county takes over the water, the maintaining the water system of a cluster development. So it takes that out of the hands of, and the burden of the homeowners, I don't know. But it sounds like that's a non-starter, if you can't figure that out, I mean, what, you described it, every other meeting, you talk about the difficulty, trying to meet the high standards and all. I mean, out with us, we just drill a well, and we get water,
Well, yeah, and I think most people that coming in,
Did you find one?
don't wanna be in an HOA. I wouldn't be in an HOA for nothing. Yeah.
Right.
Just think everything
And
happened.
that's the thing, people moved to North Idaho, not
Exactly.
because they had an HOA where they came from.
And they
I'm right in the
One of
middle
those-
of that.
So,
It's not a clean idea, because I'll tell you, like where I'm at, behind us, I have a couple of lots that are on my farm that are in a cluster, just what you're talking about, they're 20 acre parcels, but they could be 5. And the problem is, they have a private road, and we got a ton of snow out there.
Yeah.
And there's no way they're gonna get it out in the winter unless they have someone maintaining that road. And so it's kind of funny what you bring up, because I'm watching them all just collide now, because you have the HOA folks that say, we gotta have a road maintenance agreement, we gotta have an HOA, we gotta, otherwise you're not gonna be able to go out in the winter, and the road's deteriorating. And then you have the other ones, just like you're saying, come from California or whatever, say, I don't want anything to do with an HOA, and I don't want to pay for anything, but I want to use the road. So it's a tough situation, In the end of the day, the road's got to be maintained, right?
We had a friend who lived up in Harrison, similar thing, and he's like, you know what, I'll just do it myself. So he took it upon himself just to plow the roads so everybody could get out, so they wouldn't have an HOA, so they wouldn't have an issue. So unless you have a good Samaritan like that,
I plow a half-mile road
Or is this?
by myself. Once in a while, one of the neighbors will come out.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing it though.
See, I don't like that idea because I'm the guy who plows around.
Oh, I get
They don't
on
look
the
at me and my
tractor.
tractor.
It falls somewhere, it falls
Well,
someone's responsibility.
You know, one of the things tossing about all this business of 5-acre and 10-acre properties, and then we, on the other hand, we talk about trying to provide economical housing for our younger generations. You know what a 10-acre lot in my subdivision is sold for now? About $700,000.
5 acres right in front of me.
Just a lot.
2 5-acre parcels in front of me, well, 3, and another one across the road.
But isn't
All
that the
sold over
purpose?
for 500,000 apiece.
Yeah.
You know, the purpose to me more, that's what the cities provide,
Yeah.
is that you don't have to, especially in the county, and from what we're seeing in here, the county is more of where you get to at, maybe at that age, when you can afford, and you can have that piece of property, you can have that parcel, and you can do those things. You know, early 20s, just getting married, that's not, well, for maybe a lot of people, maybe for some it is. That's not even an option, right? And for jobs and that, they need to be closer to the city. So from a housing perspective of what the county should or shouldn't do, the cities, I think, are more, it's incumbent upon them to provide that type of housing, maybe that density, to allow for those people to have their jobs, have that access. They may have to have the public transportation. And then as they grow, you know, hopefully are wise in their spending and budgeting and living, that you get to that. I mean, when we were first married, we were in this teeny tiny little hovel, right? That's all you had. And we had to drive actually 30 minutes one way just to get to work. And there was no public transportation. And then we got closer, and then we got in, and then we started coming back out again as we got, and that seems to be a normal progression with most people. So that I am a little hesitant with the whole like affordable housing in that we have to do this, we have to do this. The county may not have to do that. That's not the responsibility of the county, that's the
If
responsibility
you
of
want
the
your
cities.
freedom, your rights and stuff, I mean, I saved and worked my butt off so that I could buy my 10 acres
Right.
and build it. And it wasn't easy. I worked lots and lots of overtime to do it. But I've got all the other guys I'm working with, they're putting their money in this and that, and they're going out part. I put mine in my land. That was everything to me, was my
And I
land.
agree 100% with everything you said, except my problem here is that cities have an uncontrolled desire to incorporate county land.
It is a huge problem.
Yeah, that's the problem I'm thinking about.
Well,
Yeah,
and
see,
we can't
so-
handle that, that's a legislative issue.
Yeah.
So we have to work with our legislators in order to do something, in order to have the county still have some skin in that game.
Exactly, because if we just allow them to gobble the whole thing up,
Then it's all-
there won't be any need for
There
this
won't be a county.
organization, because
Correct.
it'll all be towns.
So I mean, you look at
And
Post
the
Falls and
cities-
Coeur d'Alene are side by side.
Mhm.
They're side by side with state line. They're right into,
Dalton Gardens,
Dalton. you know, everything. You're just going, it's all one big city.
Yeah.
Just
And cities don't, I mean, developers get the land, they have property rights, and then they annex. They ask the city, can we
Correct.
be annexed? And they come forward with a proposal, and then they ask the city, can I be annexed? And they do a review, say, is there adequate sewer, is there adequate water? Can we serve it with fire and everything else? So then they have a public hearing on that, and then that's when it is approved, so.
and the county
Or
has no
denied. So
say.
they could deny it. The county, I guess the county could show up at these hearings and say, don't do it, but I don't know if we're
Is there a
politically,
legal
politically, that's
basis?
gonna happen.
Right, yeah,
And then there's really no annexation police,
Right,
right.
so.
to be honest.
Yeah,
Except
so
for the
it's-
AOIs.
Yeah,
That seems to
Right,
be
they-
the only, you know,
That's the only
issue
tool,
there.
but-
And now that's somewhat back into the hands of the county.
yeah.
But that's only just been a recent development, so, and even then, they still have that ability, right, if it's contiguous, they
Yeah,
can just
correct.
keep going.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, just
As long as
gobble the whole
yeah,
thing
yeah.
up, that's
Right.
what I'm concerned about. Just
And
gobble the
part
whole
of
thing up.
annexation, they have to do to and through, so if they annex the property, they have to push the sewer and
Right.
water to the end of it, so it's ready for the next
The
piece.
next one,
So
correct.
part of that annexation, that piece, they
That
could-
makes
they
it
prepare.
the contiguous,
Right,
keep
that they can
going
keep
and keep
moving.
going, right.
At least we're controlling the sewer effluent that way, but
Yeah.
whereas I'm concerned that we'll develop these, the cities will incorporate areas and make them all septic tank and drain fields on 14,000 square foot lots.
Yeah, I
But
think,
it's 8,250, actually.
8,250.
8,250 square feet, that's a minimum lot size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a cluster.
Yeah, but you look at the old towns and small towns, and that's what they've got.
Correct.
Sewers, and some of them aren't very good sewers.
Yeah.
Ben, you found one, a cluster?
Yes,
Yeah, this is a subdivision that was approved in '05. This off of Greens Ferry, south of the river. And it's called Bella Ridge. There's a range of different lot sizes here, but they have this larger conservation tract at the end of it. I think this one, it was more for topography reasons as to why that was considered to be conserved, and, so anyways, I'm not sure at the time whether or not they were able to get bonus density here, but that is just one that came to mind. So I can certainly forward some information on that one if you're interested, but I think what it said on the plat is that they have individual septics, but then they're served by a public water system.
Green Ferry
Water.
So
It's a
when-
different, it's an independent taxing district,
Yeah.
the Greensferry Water.
So when they have
And they
that
have
part,
allowed, right, sorry,
No, go ahead.
the Greensferry then has to allow them to come into their taxing district. Because I know North Kootenai Water right now is not granting any.
Yeah, they would do it at the time of plating, so we would make
Yeah.
sure that they have the ability to serve the subdivision before it's approved. Otherwise, we're not gonna approve it. But yeah, I mean, Greens Ferry has problems now, and they don't really allow for any more connections.
Yeah, most of them don't.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
so,
Sue.
no, when they do those conservation areas, once they do that, that's tied up, they can't do anything with that property other than
Yeah, so.
direct type stuff, is that correct?
Yeah, so this one is, it says here, this lot is specifically encumbered by the grant of development rights and conservation easement. So I don't know what's in the easement just by looking at the plat, and I have to go to the actual document to see. But I think it's, I'm not sure, I'm speculating.
I'm just concerned
But the
that
intent of it was
20
to
year-
not be able to build on it.
20 years down the
Right.
road, somebody come in and try to buy that piece and
No.
chop it up, build
Yeah,
on a
right.
mountainside
No.
type stuff.
Once it's set aside.
Yeah, it's recorded like that.
It's a pretty solid deal then.
Yeah, and that would be part of our standards, because if they're getting benefit from having the conservation design, because there are lots that are less than 5 acres out here, then we would make it a requirement that they can't further subdivide without maybe potentially looking at the zone change or something. But, yeah.
You mentioned that that was possibly topography that, so it's not even usable building space?
Potentially.
It's probably
so
steep,
steep,
yeah,
like, hey, let's put the houses down here and get the density.
So is that
and-
really even a
access,
conservation
yeah.
area at that point? Because if it's
Hiking
not
trail.
even,
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
Hiking trail,
Yeah.
maybe,
I
maybe
really-
not. It seems a little bit almost to Lee's
cheat.
point of, yeah,
Right.
Well,
it's
but
a
it's-
serial
that's what they do.
subdivision.
And if it's not accessible, is it actually
Correct.
open space
Right.
Yeah.
or,
Right.
to be even considered within that discussion about recreation and,
You
Well,
know,
and that's like
our
when-
discussion has a perfect example where I used to live on the Wasatch Front in Utah. There, the towns just kept growing, there's 3 or 4 counties there, and of course Salt Lake's 500,000 people with Sandy and all that, but the mountains go up on the east side of those communities to over 10,000 feet. And the last subdivision I was in there was city lots, pretty good sized ones. But they built that subdivision right up to the national forest boundary. And gobbled up, the county didn't have any say in any of that anymore. It was gone. And my house was at 5,300 feet above sea level because I had a 10,000-foot mountain right behind the house.
but there's houses on it now.
No, not on that, it's National
All the
Forest
way
System
down to
land,
the-
but that's the only thing that stopped them. And of course, and then they built clear out to the Great Salt Lake, and they couldn't go any further that way either, because it had flooded them every once in a while. But that whole face, all the way along from Brigham City clear to Provo is all one city now.
It's an hour and a half. We drove it not too long ago. It doesn't stop. It's an hour and a half of 80 miles an hour.
But you don't see any
constant
dirty
city.
cars, because it's all pavement. When I was down there in October, I couldn't believe it. There wasn't a dirty car anywhere.
There was no dirt.
I know, it's all pavement. I was like, the guy who was driving with, it's like, there ain't no dirty cars here, look at it.
Well,
Yeah,
I
I-
lived there twice. I was stationed there twice, one for 10 years and one for 3 years. And it's all one city for, like you say, what, almost 100 miles, I think, or darn close, 60 miles.
Oh, no, yeah, well over.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think, you know, if we're looking at trying to preserve open space and preserve working lands, then incorporating a mix of higher lot sizes, you know, minimum lot sizes, and also making some better specifications for what conservation design looks like.
Yes.
This is what a conservation lot needs to include. You have to have range of different, perhaps slopes or whatever. It can't be
Yeah,
all in excess of 35% or whatever that is really undevelopable anyways, or
Right.
perhaps maybe not all that worth
Well,
conserving.
it should be accessible to the public if it's open.
It should be a
Right.
right of way, a trail
It should
easement
be
out
right-
there
Correct.
for
Something.
people, and so maybe
Yeah.
some kind of
Exactly.
amenities for the people to use.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be harder, I guess, if you're gonna open that up for public use, for people to be interested in that. Because, again, I think what we're hearing is that, you know, I want my kind of slice of heaven, and so if I'm gonna get a 2-acre lot out here, which is great, but I wanna have the ability to have a 70-acre open space area that I can recreate and hike on, ride horses, or whatever it is. I still want to have me and my community, and I don't necessarily want the general public there.
Well, even if it's open only to
Yeah.
the subdivision.
Yeah,
I mean, the people in subdivision should have the right to go there, even if the rest of the public
You know,
doesn't.
you
Or
have-
if they control
Spokane
it.
County has those, they're not
So if they have some
parks.
kind of easement, they could.
I don't know what you call them there, but they're like, well, maybe they're kind of like parks, but where the county owns the land and has large open areas for
Mhm.
people who wanna, like four-wheel, you can get out here, you can get horseback right over here. You know, if the county had a way to set aside land, you could have more open land for public use.
When we do that, we just create more employees and taxpayers to take care of it for.
That's right, you're gonna increase the tax base.
I mean,
Burden. Yeah.
yeah, so.
The other thing I wanted to point out, I mean, you were talking about the 5-acre lots, 10-acre lots, conservation, but look at the answer to number 5. The top priority is preserving working lands, agriculture, timber, ranch lands. Realistically, you're not gonna do that if you continue to allow 5 and 10-acre parcels. I know down my way, I'm hanging on, a lot of farmers are just bailing, because it's just, the incentive to sell is so great, and then, once there's a sale even of a 20-acre parcel, a 30-acre parcel, you can't farm 20-acre parcels, you know? I hay around my place and I get permission by my neighbors, but I'm gonna stop, because it's just too complicated. And so, if you're really gonna have farm and ranch lands, you gotta find a way to incentivize folks to keep their 70, 80, 100-acre parcel. Otherwise, you're just not gonna have it.
You gotta
Yeah, I don't-
disincentivize the growth.
I guess maybe
that?
I'm.
Have to
pessimist.
disincentivize the growth.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any way for us to retain agricultural activities in Kootenai County, to be honest with you, other than just having a horse or two or something like that. But actually farming and irrigating to grow anything, or you might have a truck garden or something like that, you know, a couple acres. where
Well,
you grow-
Latah County, I don't know the extent of it, you may know, but Latah County has some pretty strict rules. It's maintaining farmland outside the city limits of Moscow. And I don't know how they're doing it, but there is, might be
Yeah,
worth
but you're
looking
gonna
at.
get into personal property rights so fast over that, like you say, the farmers wanna sell the land, I mean, yeah.
Right, and I think down in Latah, they have real restrictions that don't allow that, and don't allow these even 5, 10-acre parcels in certain areas.
But what he's talking about now, is exactly what the tribe's trying to do now. They're trying to set their limits, so they can't sell them all off and chop it all up.
Yeah.
So,
But
yeah.
that's a real tension here. People want farmland, you gotta find a way to incentivize people to have farmland, otherwise you're just not gonna have it.
Yeah, so this was a good discussion about lot sizes, and it's gonna be very important in the
This has
future.
been
when we-
good, I appreciate the
Yeah.
discussion, guys, but, I don't know.
So keep lot sizes in mind, and property rights, that's also gonna be very
The
important.
bigger the
Yep.
better.
So, Craig and I have to excuse ourselves, Madam
Okay.
Chair, we have
I
another meeting,
I
so,
like.
Thank you.
thank you. Man will let us know when we
Yep.
updates, so thanks.
Alrighty, well, did we, anything else on the comp plan, or we wanna go ahead and go
Thanks,
into
guys.
service mining?
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Does anybody have a cough drop?
No.
see if I can get you one.
Okay, thanks.
I'll run out.
Talk in the microphone over.
So are you moving on to surface mining? Is that, we're
Sure.
good with that? All right,
Sounds good.
let's keep moving on. All right, Ben, did you wanna,
Yeah, well, this is kind of revisiting the surface mining code amendment. This is just, again, a proposal that staff has been working on, taking into consideration what we've heard in our last public hearing in May, and with the different mine operators, as well as some of the different agencies. So I'm not sure if you guys have had the opportunity to read and ask questions or have questions prepared. Really, it is meant more of an introduction of it to you. And I know that what we had talked about doing is eventually coming back in another workshop, but including mine operators to be part of that. This again was meant to be more like, here's what we've got so far, just so that you guys have an opportunity to kind of maybe read it through and formulate some of your thoughts before we have the mine operators present. So I guess that's just kind of what staff has been looking at this point. I think one of the main, one of the main concerns or issues that was brought up and that has been reviewed by our legal counsel is when or to what mines these standards can apply to, whether they can be retroactively applied to existing mines, or if they need to be applied to new mines going forward. And the conclusion of that is that the standards need to apply to new mines moving forward rather than retroactively applying to existing mines. And so I know that that's not what the Aquifer Protection District is wanting to here. They were wanting it to apply to existing mines because there are a lot of existing mines over the Rathrum Prairie Aquifer. And based on our legal counsel's advice is that those are gonna be kind of a non-conforming situation, and we really don't have the ability to apply standards upon them.
Well, you get into a takings problem, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you could maybe do it, but you have to pay for it.
yeah, and I think Pat's probably, and he's not available for us, but I think if he were here, he would probably agree and say we're a losing battle if that's something that we're looking
What
at.
about when their permit is up and to get it renewed, with renewed permit, then apply?
Yeah, so there's two different things that we're talking about here. There are those that are outright zoned mining. And I can pull up the zoning map just so that you kind of have an idea of what we're talking about. But, so we have a difference in properties that are zone mining and those that are approved through a conditional use permit for restricted surface mining. And those, so we're talking about two different things. Restricted surface mines are a conditional use permit. They're good for 5-year periods.
Okay.
For those situations, yes. When they need to renew, assuming that they want to continue their mining operations, there is a renewal process. The standards can apply for the renewal of a new permit. And so those are the only circumstances in which an existing mine may be subject to those new standards when they have to apply for a new permit. But for those that are zoned mining already,
that's a by right.
it's a by right use, and therefore those standards wouldn't be able to be applied. So these purple zones, if you can kind of see it, these are mining zones. So if I zoom in kind of in those areas, you'll see that's kind of what it is.
Help me on that though. When you rezone, it's not a taking, right?
You know, that's more of a, so a conditional use permit is an outside land use approval.
Right.
So I don't know if I could really address the point clearly. And so I think there is a difference there, given that it's in some ways, a rezoning by allowing a specific use, but I don't know if it fully is.
Yeah, it's a question for Pat. Something sticks in my mind that the takings rule generally doesn't apply to zoning, that you can
You
rezone
know, I've been thinking about this. Of course, I'm an old man, I'm not gonna be around much longer, but I'd love to go after one of these outfits under CERCLA if they contaminate the aquifer. I just would love to nail their ass to the wall, boy, because I've used CERCLA to knock people out like ExxonMobil and some of the largest corporations in the world. I've got hundreds of millions of dollars in settlement claims against them. I don't think these folks understand what would happen if they did dig too deep and contaminate the aquifer, because it's a potential CERCLA action, folks, it really is. Now, I don't know whether EPA or the state of Idaho would want to take the action, but I don't want this to happen to these folks. I want them to operate. We need their material. We need to build roads, and I'm an engineer, but my God, it's like playing Russian roulette with 2 bullets in the gun. You know, it really is. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, I'm glad that if they're gonna reapply, that it would apply, but I see you've only got 20 feet in here too, and
Yeah, I noticed.
you know, we talked at length about in case they had a spill. Well, these guys aren't. They're real careful. They don't have. I'm not worried about a spill. What concerns me as an engineer and one that's provided water to thousands of people in my career, drinking water, is if you penetrate the aquifer, it's no longer a groundwater source by law. It is a groundwater source influenced by surface water, and then that puts a whole completely different scenario of testing and requirements into effect. It has to be chlorinated, and of course, none of the water in Coeur d'Alene now, or my system, we're pumping raw water and feeding it to people because it's good water. But the requirements, my God, it just about kills me. They change the requirements on me every 6 months for the drinking water system I manage. We're into this what is it, all these things that they put on.
PFAS?
Yeah, PFAS, yeah. My God, all the testing for that, I just ran through a bunch of tests on our system. It cost $480 for 27 different sample tests because of that PFAS. So it's just kind of nuts to.
Well, how does that work though? Because didn't we establish that the mine that you see from the freeway in Spokane?
Oh, yeah.
They penetrated, they're down into the aquifer.
Oh, yeah,
they're
and they're
right.
still operating.
Yeah, but nobody's gone after them.
Yeah.
Well, they're
But
also in Spokane.
apparently
Yeah.
well, do you think that if they had, as a result of them having current operations into the aquifer, and they were contaminating the water, don't you think that somebody would have done something?
Well, I
Because-
don't know that they're contaminating the water. What I'm saying is that it changes the whole approach to managing the drinking water system. I would suspect that if somebody really raised heck with EPA, Region 10, that every single drinking water well downstream from the central premix pit would now be required to chlorinate all their water. Now, the state of Washington has it, they're pretty crazy with some of their regulations. They may already be requiring every one of their drinking water systems in the state of Washington to chlorinate their water. So that doesn't make any difference. But in Idaho, we haven't done that. We've said if you've got good, clean, raw water, you don't have to chlorinate it. But if you chlorinate the water, you go from one test a month to a test every single day of the year for a chlorinated system. That's the first requirement. Just that you have to test for chlorine residual, that's what that test is for. So it's the idea that now, and in Idaho, we've got, DEQ and everything, they've been real responsible. We've worked up against the face of the federal government requirements and said we're gonna meet the minimum requirements so that we maintain primacy over the drinking water programs in Idaho. And in some states like California, Washington, and Oregon, they've added all kinds of requirements to their drinking water system requirements, way beyond what the federal government requires. But that's the right, they can do that, the state government can do that, as long as they meet the minimum. In Idaho, we say we're gonna meet the minimum. and it's okay, I don't have a problem with that. But boy, if you booger one of these things up,
How did we get this 20 feet from,
Yeah.
it used to be 50, right? It was 50? How did we
Yeah.
get to 20?
Kind of a hybrid of some of the different comments that we received. If you'll recall, one of the mining operators was represented by legal counsel, and based on the information provided by the Aquifer Protection District, the number of 50 feet didn't really have any good sound evidence as to why it was 50 feet. It just seemed like, it seemed reasonable was probably the best explanation.
I was there at that meeting and it seemed like they did have good
I think,
scientific backing for this.
yeah, I think what they were basing it on was some pretty large scale spills. And, I think the case for the mining operator saying we're never gonna have quantities of, petroleum products of that, in our pits. And so it
But
doesn't
again, we're
make,
not talking about spills
but
necessarily.
see, that's the problem. They approached it from a spill standpoint. See, everybody approached it from the spill standpoint. And that bothered me because I'm not concerned about these operators spilling a whole great big huge. I know how they operate. They don't have 50,000 gallons of something down in the bottom of the pit, that would, it's this other business of having to
Accidentally.
chlorinate all of the drinking water because you've got a groundwater source influenced by surface water.
So you're saying it's a spill, they came from a spill standpoint versus an exposure standpoint?
Well, it's from looking at it from a spill standpoint versus looking at it from how the government will look at the fact that if you get so close to the aquifer, will it now be considered an aquifer influenced by surface water? And that's up to some government official someplace.
Well, is 20 feet enough for that?
Yeah, see, and they'd say that that's arbitrary and capricious.
Well, you're talking about two different things here. You're talking about the potential for a spill. I'm sympathetic to that, although I do remember the statements from the miners saying, we don't have, we might have a leak in our tractor or something, and,
Yeah.
it's a minor thing. And, we store most of our fuel up top anyway, that kind of thing. That makes sense.
They do.
But in terms of not being arbitrary and capricious, if there's some scientific data that would determine what's intrusion into groundwater, that's a separate issue that you're bringing up.
Yeah, that's a whole separate issue. See?
There's gotta be some data out there on what, given the type of ground, this is very porous ground. I remember one of our experts came in and testified, I asked him how fast we had a spill issue, how fast the reaction time was and everything, and I was stunned by.
Very fast.
It was like, you
Yeah.
gotta be right on it, otherwise it goes right into the aquifer.
Right, because of the geological nature of it,
Yeah, it was like, I don't know, like a foot every 10 seconds or something. It's like, holy heck. You
The
can't stop it.
whole thing is a very hard thing to quantify from an engineering and scientific standpoint, because every single area you're digging in out on the Rathdrum Prairie, for instance, is different because of the Lake Missoula thing, that washed all that stuff out there.
Coming back to those different, where they come together, it seems to me, is a spill is a one-time intrusion into the aquifer. The intrusion issue seems to me like a Chinese water torture issue, that it's over time, surface water and surface contaminants are continually going in, right? So it'd be interesting to have data on what.
See, the issue is groundwater influenced by surface water. They're not talking about a spill of a chemical. They're talking about coliform bacteria. They're talking about giardia and things of that nature, biological contaminations from a surface
Well,
water.
and then the question is, how many feet do you need because
Yeah,
of this type
yeah.
of, so, because let's face it, surface water interfaces with groundwater, that's how it gets there. It has to percolate down, so.
I can give you, I had wells drilled, okay, well, because of the recharge of the aquifer, a lot of it comes from Coeur d'Alene Lake and the Coeur d'Alene and the Spokane River. Well, those sources are contaminated because of the mining, okay? I didn't find one bit of heavy metals in any of the water that was really close from the wells in Coeur d'Alene and Postwall. You would have thought that the contaminated water in the river and the lake would be getting in there, you know, but it wasn't. And and it wasn't all that far away. So I was very pleased, of course, but so the contamination stays on the shorelines and all that. And we just sampled all the shoreline of the Coeur d'Alene River and Coeur d'Alene Lake, and it came out pretty darn good. I mean, and so good that we're not gonna send out any kind of warnings to people for swimming and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So the ground does filter it, you know, but how much? How much ground do you need?
Isn't that what the hydrologist is supposed to figure out?
Yeah,
I
but-
mean, we're gonna require them to have a hydrologist on each site, correct? Is that-
Yeah, it's,
There'd be testing that'd have to be done on each site.
Yeah,
On each new site.
each new site.
yeah. So, based on each site, each test he does, he should be the one probably determine the depth. You know,
Yeah,
you gotta stay away.
Yeah, if I recall, the logic of that was you have different soils in different
Exactly.
locations, so.
And I don't have a problem with the you know, somebody who knows what they're doing, talking about it and stuff, and coming up with that. Thing I do have a problem with, well, two things. I think 20 feet is not near enough myself, just because I wanna keep the aquifer clear. But the other thing is, why would we give be possibly grant a variance to go deeper? And I don't understand that. What situation would we have that would let them go deeper than 20 feet from the aquifer?
I think the idea is that, again, it's a process to be considered by the Board of County Commissioners if they're demonstrating that there's some kind of hardship that they have as to why they can't observe this. Again, it's an option for people to consider. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna be approved.
It makes
But if it's
public
there,
health
that
issue
gives them the right to
political.
try.
Sure, but any standard like this is subject to a variance request, regardless of whether we say it or not.
And also, I think that was originally thought of because it was 50 feet.
Yeah,
And there was an option, well, maybe 50 feet in this particular situation is too much. Let's give them a little variance at 20 feet. I agree with you, it just doesn't sound like enough.
Yeah, where we got, sorry to chime in real quick, but where 20 feet came from is consistent with Spokane County.
And they're the ones that had the problem.
And so, well, I mean, those pits were established before they had these standards here.
My problem with it is, I'm just not hearing any scientific data to back
Yeah,
up anything.
Right, exactly.
I think
I'm
that's what
really
the
uncomfortable with
hydrologist
that.
does. That's my thinking.
I'm super uncomfortable, because I can guarantee you, because of the work I do, if there's a contamination, and someone comes to me and says, my property now is worth nothing because it was, the aquifer is contaminated, I'm gonna go out and hire an expert. I'm gonna hire a hydrologist, and believe me, they are going to have opinions that this was improper, or it was proper, or whatever, but they're gonna have opinions. They're out there, we just need to engage someone that
We
knows what
have
they're
two
doing.
opinions.
We've tried, unfortunately, on numerous attempts to try and get some information from Spokane County. I can't even tell you how many calls we've put out to them, emails, and they never return.
What I'm
Is
talking
that
about.
like, how do they get to that number? Like,
Wait,
where did you get to that number? That would be helpful for us to kind of build from.
Well, I don't think they wanna let you know what their information says.
Yeah, and it may be outdated, it may not be applicable to this
Maybe.
area. With 2 clicks of my mouse, I can go to a website or a platform I subscribe to, and I can find you a hydrologist. I can find you a top-notch hydrologist. I hire only the best experts. I can find you one. The county just needs to engage somebody.
Yeah, the Aquifer Protection District has reached out to some hydrologists to get maybe some feedback on what seems to be more appropriate. So perhaps some scientific data from a hydrogeologist to say, this is why we think this particular number is reasonable.
Well, what I'm suggesting is, maybe I'm off base, but I think this is such an important, critical issue that affects so many people. the county ought to pungle up the money to hire someone to go to the specific sites and analyze them. Because what you're dealing with is taking livelihoods away if you don't get the number right, or damaging people's property, or worst case scenario, causing cancer and other problems in people's bodies. I think it's worth the money to have a hydrologist or a hydrologist outfit do a scientific study. I do it all the time in my work. I do this all the time. And
The
it's
scientific
just
study doing, what are you suggesting, I guess, with, what would the study be? Going to each individual site and testing their test wells, or?
I'm no hydrologist, but I suspect, just knowing kind of how experts, the entire aquifer is, what's the geographic scope, okay? And then they're gonna tell you what they think they need to do in terms of tests, and they have to run 5 or 10 tests in these various areas or whatever. And then they would come up with an opinion as to, well, you'll probably get some ancillary opinions too, but what is the appropriate distance for these, for the mining? And prepare yourself, because it could be they say no appropriate distance, there's no, they shouldn't be mining over this. I mean, you may hear that, or they may say, no, it's totally appropriate, but, we shouldn't be ostriches with our heads in the sand and not want to know the truth. We should really get someone who's an expert at this,
We
and
need
let
to
them
at
do
least do
their
a
thing.
preliminary study on it.
What's that?
We need to at least do a preliminary study.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
But, and on that, each site's gonna be different.
Yeah,
well, that's an issue you would give to the expert of, okay, so I'm just gonna make it up. So you have this geographical area. Expert comes in and says, okay, it's gonna cost, $20,000 for me to do this project. I'm gonna go take these samples from all these different areas to understand what the geology is. Because, you have certain geological areas. You can map it. There's maps for this stuff. What's gravel, what's clay, all that. And then they're gonna give you opinions. And the opinion may be, 5 feet is fine here, no feet is fine over here, 20 feet is okay over there, whatever it is, you're gonna be going into it with your eyes open and probably with a much better a statute than just, shooting in the dark. I really do think, I think this is a really important issue.
With a sensitive resource aquifer designation, is there anything in that talks about the potential for excavating within a certain distance of the aquifer or anything like that? Because it's a special designation, the aquifer is a special
I
designation.
don't believe that there is.
Yeah.
You're not positive, but I don't believe so.
Okay, because I would have thought when they came up with this designation, I hope it wasn't just arbitrary, we'll make this river a wild and scenic river whether you like it or not, like we did the St. Joe 50 years ago. But anyway, the point is I don't know how when they finally said it was a sensitive resource aquifer, some official at EPA just said, well, that's what it's gonna be, or whether they actually did some kind of an analysis or something, I don't know.
Yeah, and another uncomfort level I have with this is we're trying to make decisions based upon the, not really even testimony of interested parties. We have people who want their mine telling us, you don't have to worry about this, you don't have to worry about that. We have the aquifer folks, which God love them, I'm glad they're there protecting the aquifer, but they've got a bias. I feel like we're in a position of a judge in a complex case that has major ramifications. And what the judge does is they go hire their own expert. They get a neutral. And I think that's what the county ought to do here. I really do. The more I look at this aquifer thing keeps raising its head. And not only with this issue, but I think it would be wise to engage a top-notch hydrologist or a company that does these kinds of studies, and for the county, maybe to apply it here, but there may be other areas where it's going to apply, because it's such an important issue. And on both sides, I'm sympathetic to the guys that want to mine, they want to make a living. And if we're restricting them and hurting them economically for no reason because of an arbitrary rule, I think that's wrong.
Yeah.
And the reverse is wrong too. I
Well,
just feel like
and
we're shooting in the
again,
dark.
I've been in circular enforcement since 1982, and I don't like having to do that, but I don't know that these folks realize what might happen. Now, you're not gonna get a circular action if the EPA declares that this is an aquifer influenced by surface water. That won't create a circular action. But if you did have a spill that did contaminate it, then you would have a circular action. So I don't wanna misrepresent things here, folks, but and the possibility of a spill is less than somebody just arbitrary saying this is an aquifer now influenced by surface water. That's a political or a good feeling declaration. It wouldn't probably have anything much to do with any science at all. It would just be some official someplace in probably a Democratic administration, and just making that declaration.
Yeah, I certainly sympathize with your point, and I think that's kind of where we came with a hybrid of saying, look, is there a baseline that we can have? And 20 feet seemed to be consistent with what Spokane County has, trying to get some more information from them. And then also hearing from this body too, at the hearing, saying, yeah, it shouldn't, in any case, drop below 20 feet is what I recalled hearing.
Yeah, one did say that, yeah.
And so that's kind of where it started, but with the allowance of people doing some kind of hydrogeological analysis themselves. So making an on-site, site-specific analysis saying, here's a geologist, I get it, there may be some bias there, given that the mine operator is making, essentially their contractor or employee. So there may be some bias there, but to get some kind of data on that site specifically saying, this is why we think we can go, to this depth, and whether or not this needs to be approved, or we have a third party review that to confirm, but yeah.
If we have to have a Band-Aid or something, okay, but again, I'm gonna stand by my ground on this one. I do believe this is such an important issue, this aquifer, that if it hasn't been done yet, and apparently hasn't, we should have someone who's an expert in this, who's a neutral, or working for the county to figure this out for the citizens, because I just see a whole host of problems. Not only are you gonna have, let's say the rule is not protective enough of the aquifer, and there's some big bad company that goes out there and follows the rule, but pollutes the aquifer. They're not gonna be civilly liable. They get sued, they're gonna hold this up that the county created and say, look, I was within the bounds of the law, I'm okay. You can't nail me for that,
Well, they still have, there are other regulations though that apply to just these, like, we've got federal requirements, state requirements that they're still liable to, so.
Maybe, maybe not, it depends, but, to put it, to state it in sort of a pointed way, I feel like to shoot in the dark like this is to institute negligently, it's negligent statutory construction, because we really don't have scientific basis for what we're doing. Spokane had it, but, I think it would be good for the county to hire a neutral to analyze the aquifer issue, and it's gonna keep coming up in different ways, and it'd be good to have an expert to go to.
What would it take to actually implement that idea?
Well, I know that, like I said, the Aquifer Protection District is working on the idea of hiring a consultant to do some analysis. What exactly that includes, I'm not exactly sure. But they are exploring that idea.
Why can't we get together with them and go together and hire a hydrologist? There's, somebody get
Yeah, the
done
Protection
right.
District has a budget. They have discussed, again, putting aside some money. I think they got an estimate from a hydrogeologist. And so I think they're strongly considering getting some data from them.
Well, if it's a fiscal issue, then maybe the county and them and the interested parties that are, and maybe everybody should pungle up some money and put it in the kitty and get someone who knows what they're doing. I mean, get a neutral party that way. But what I'm feeling is like there's resistance because of the fiscal problem. Because maybe a time is an issue too, but where are you gonna get the money to hire this person? I just think it's too important not to
Do we know
find.
whether or not the county could enter into an agreement with those folks under Idaho has a statute where various agencies in the state can get together and do things together. There's an actual statute like that. And I did that with the Basin Commission. I'd get together with Fish and Game, or I'd get together with DEQ or something, and we'd put our funds together and do some things. But I don't know whether a county and this other organization could do it under state regulation. I don't know. Because you'd have to check into that, see if they could be some kind of a cooperative agreement that follows those state of Idaho regulations and stuff, if you wanted to try to make an MOU or something, some kind of a memorandum of agreement or something.
Well, the county must have projects similar to this where they go out and have to fund them. I mean, how do you get the funds? Do you go to the,
Yeah, the funds are provided, the Aquifer Protection District is a board, an advisory board of the county. And so the county commissioners have
So,
granted them
so they're
funds
funded by
for
the
their
county,
budget,
then,
yeah.
right? Is that what you're saying? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
so we're already funding them,
Mhm.
is what you're saying?
Yes.
And so maybe we could find other sources of funding. I mean, maybe they're not biased, but I kind of get the feeling sometimes maybe they're biased. I don't know. What do you think?
We learned that in law school.
I'm paid to ask the loaded questions.
Everybody's biased. We have ethics training sessions for all of our engineers every year to keep them from being biased.
Well,
That's hard to do.
everybody has a bias, right? But well, I'll just tell you what I feel. I appreciate what they say, and I really do value their input. But I feel sometimes maybe they're, you know, they're overly focused. Maybe I don't know that they could be biased. Maybe I'm wrong. But again, I think you need the most neutral expert you can get to do an analysis.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I don't think there's anything wrong with having more data and specific data to the question at hand. So I think it's a good idea. I think we should do that. I think the Aquifer Protection District is considering that.
How close are they to doing that?
You know, I missed the last meeting that we had, which was last week. So I'm thinking they have the estimate. I think they're just kind of weighing out whether or not they're gonna pull the trigger and make the decision to appropriate those funds.
Is there anything this body can do to
Yeah.
encourage them?
Yeah, I could reach out to the Aquifer Protection District and say, hey, look, you know, the planning commission is interested in this data.
Yeah.
Encourage them to help us.
They would encourage you to do so.
Information.
Well, like you
Just
said, you
push
know,
the switch, just like turning on, just push it.
we're not trying to take anything away from the mining companies, but we also want to protect the, you know, let them do what they do
No water, no
to the
light.
best there, but we still gotta protect the aquifer. So,
Anything else?
I think that the 20-foot thing is about the only thing that I had a real problem with. It's just, it gives me the willies.
well, that and then
Yeah.
that somebody can make their, and I don't know who.
Well,
At the
also,
time, who would be
yeah,
in
your
charge, but-
your point about
Well,
getting a
getting
variance
a
even
variance.
for that, yeah.
For 20 feet.
Yeah, I have some problems
I
with
just
that
don't think
too.
it.
See, again, your expert's gonna tell you.
Yeah,
Don't
that's
do
it.
that, you know?
Yep.
Again, your expert may say 20 feet is, you know, there should be, you shouldn't have mining. I mean, you know, we don't know the answer to these questions. That's what's troubling me. I mean, you're concerned, if an expert told you that it's reasonable to have a variance up to 10 feet in this situation, in these situations, you would be less concerned, right?
I would be a little less.
But
I
it shows your bias, but that's
Well,
okay.
my bias is all for the aquifer. I live over the aquifer.
Sure, yeah.
20 feet's not very far when you.
Yeah, I mean, what you're really saying isn't a bias. It's a scientific concern
Yeah.
that the impact of intrusion into the aquifers is so damaging
Yeah.
that that weighs into the factor, you know, you only have a 10% risk of getting cancer, but if you're that 10%, it's pretty catastrophic, right? So you're gonna do your tests, you're gonna, check yourself out and all that. So, same thing here, that the risk is the potential damage is so high that you become less and less intolerant of risking it.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's one of the factors an expert looks at.
Yeah, and it's not just one or two people, it's thousands of people.
Yeah.
Downstream, so.
So,
Not only that, but the increased cost in managing a drinking water system, if we had the declaration that something happened that caused influence of surface water to the groundwater, every single system downstream, its cost would sky high. In fact, I talked to somebody and we're talking about millions of dollars increase in operating costs for drinking water systems downstream from an aquifer that's now influenced by surface water.
Well, I mean, like I say, I'd say you gotta be prepared to hear what you don't wanna hear. Or maybe we can't have mining, in this area. I don't know, but I think we should get the truth, the data. And maybe I don't wanna get into dangerous territory here, but what's ironic in this day and age is we think we're data driven, but you know, political influence from whichever side people are on tends to override the data. And I'm a believer that you gotta stick to the data, you gotta stick to the science and not be influenced by agendas or, you know, political pattern, you know, you just gotta follow the data.
Well,
And here we don't have it,
I
that's.
I
so we're
have
at
too
50
much
feet right now.
political experience to believe that, so.
There's nothing. 50 feet was our proposal, or somebody's proposal when we first came up with it.
Yeah, right now, there's nothing.
For the non-compliant ones, the already existing ones.
And they're not non-compliant, they're existing.
They're existing.
Because, yeah.
And this would not affect them at all.
Mhm.
So what would happen if they actually break that barrier? Because there's no requirements right now on the books, correct?
Correct.
So if they go all the way to the aquifer,
They're subject to state and federal requirements.
Yeah, if they broke through the aquifer, say somebody upstream, then what I foresee is maybe a declaration like I've talked about, and then every single water system downstream can sue them.
Yeah, Yeah.
It would be in the courts, you know, right away. If the regulatory agency declared that what they did caused what I'm talking
Sure.
about. Now, if they had a spill and actually put a whole bunch of chemicals in the aquifer, then that's a circle action. That's a release of a hazardous substance, and so, you know.
so the ones that are by right, those are still treated differently, correct? Than what we're doing the surface mining, or what is the
yeah,
difference?
so the standards would apply to only new mines that are established in the mining zone as of whenever this code is implemented. Or restricted surface mines that are approved through a CUP. And that's either an establishment of a new mine or a renewal of a CUP to continue that restricted surface mine. So there's a separation here with all of the mines that are currently in place that are under the mining zone. It doesn't matter what we're talking about changing, those are still not gonna be applied to those existing mines. So they're still gonna only be held to the state and federal requirements. So just wanted to make sure that was clear.
One question. So right now, before we get something done with this, somebody comes in and wants a new mine, they're under the old rules, correct?
Sorry, say that again, I missed.
If somebody comes in and starts a new mine, gets approved, put in a new mine,
Yeah,
they're under as long as this is not in effect, they're under the old rules,
yeah,
correct?
whatever our standards are, yeah.
Can we do like Spokane's doing with their data center and put a moratorium on it until we get something in place?
I mean, it's always a possibility whether or not the board would entertain that idea. It's up.
You know, this has been rolling around in my head too, it's like, and I know where you're coming from. Should we try to get as good a one approved as we can right now as a placeholder, and then work on it some more? Or if we get the placeholder, will everybody just forget about it until we have a problem?
Well, I think to Lee's point, you put something in now that we don't have any potential legal justification
Yeah.
for
Put a
putting
Band-Aid.
ourselves into a
That's another,
liability.
yeah, you're right.
If we do
yeah.
the moratorium, then, and usually it's only like a year, that could actually give us the time
To get a
to do the
hydrologist.
study,
Yeah.
get the data, and then come back later and then decide, okay, here's the information that we received, and then go from there. So maybe I like the idea of the moratorium better than
That gives us
just
some time
the
to,
shot in the
Right.
dark,
you
yeah,
know,
that's
get
a good
the
idea,
facts that
too.
we need.
yeah.
One thing about a moratorium, you've got two types that it would affect. It'd be the brand new one and the reauthorization. We'd have to kind of consider that, because if somebody's already operating, you know, and has a business and everything, and then you put a moratorium on them getting a new permit, well, then their business goes out of business. You see what I'm saying? We'd have to kind of deal with that too a little bit, I think. Moratorium on a brand new one, no problem, you know.
Well, and hopefully we'll move quickly on this, because this is so important.
Well, the moratorium, and to that point then, is on the new stuff, and you'd have to let us know if this is viable or not. But, and somebody going through the renewal process, they could hire their own hydrologist. I'm having a hard time with the highs today. Hire their own person to do their own study and have that be able to come back,
That
and
would
then
be
they
good,
could
yeah,
either
that
get
would
that
work.
permit through that process. So then to that point, then they're not out of business until our study's done. They can still go, but it's just like an extra step, which was already in here anyway. But we would just be putting that on anyone existing who needs a renewal.
So
Would that work, Ben?
Yeah.
Well, it sounds to me like we're kind of backed into a corner where we have to pass something until we get expert data, right? I
We
mean,
don't have to, I mean,
well, have to in the sense that if we don't pass anything, there's gonna be no regulation, they can dig as deep as they want,
and this is only for new mines that we're talking about. You know, we don't.
But when you say
process a
new
lot.
mines, do you mean the renewal process too? You say
Yes, I
applies
do-
to
I
the
do mean
renewal
that.
process, so that's, well, where I'm saying, I think we're backed into a corner, because, you know, to the point over here that if you don't allow them to renew, they go out of business, right?
Yeah, I think, you know, if we're looking at, to establish, there's two different things, right? A conditional use permit for a restricted surface mine, and then the mining zone. To establish a new mine in the mining zone, you need to have a mining zone. And so right now, the mining zone is what it is unless they go through the application process to establish mining zone. Now, that's gonna take quite a bit of time, because I mean, we're gonna be aware of the application and so on. There isn't a lot of interest, I would say, for mining zone application, rezone applications. So we don't see a lot of those. We see more applications for conditional use permits for restricted surface mines because they're a little bit easier, they're a little bit more obscure in different parts of the county. They're not necessarily looking for a mining zone particularly, but just doing some kind of smaller mining operation. But those are typically outside of the aquifer boundaries. And so I don't know the numbers, but I don't know how many conditional use permits we have over the aquifer. It's probably very few. So I think we're talking about a low probability of either renewals of CUPs or establishing a new zone change for
Well, would
mine.
you be comfortable if we put a moratorium on for, what, you know, I don't know, how long is it gonna take the aquifer people to get a hydrologist on board? And are they gonna do it? You say they're considering it.
Yeah, I don't know.
They won't be able to come, I'd say a year, just depending upon how much current data they can analyze, you know, how much data we already have, you know, on
Yeah.
stuff.
We can recommend a moratorium, but it's gonna be up to the commissioners in the long run, correct?
Yes.
I think we ought to go with a moratorium for a year and
Well, I'd say-
at least get started. Because, like you said, there's not a whole bunch of people, it only takes one.
Well, what you do, pardon me, you do is say, you know, move to this, or have a, if we can do it, a moratorium for a year, or until a hydrologist renders opinions and answers these questions for us.
There you go, yeah.
And maybe that put a little pressure on whoever's gotta make that decision. I mean, I'm really uncomfortable with this idea, what we're thinking about.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a huge issue.
Yeah, that's
It
a,
is.
that's a
We
scenario
had
for
the
no
moratorium
action.
on the data centers, right, for a year?
We did.
Wasn't that one, until we could get more data and move forward on that one? So it's not uncommon to do something like that.
Do what now?
The moratoriums are not uncommon. We had one on the data center, and then that came before us, and obviously we have another thing to go over that too, so.
Well, with Ben saying that it's probably not gonna affect the miners for, if we do a year moratorium, right? You're saying it's probably not gonna be a big deal?
Well, yeah, I mean, mining zone people, they're gonna continue to operate because this wouldn't affect them. This would only affect new conditional use permits or renewals of existing conditional use
Okay.
permits. And so there are not many of those over the aquifer.
See, when I weigh your words there, not many of those against, how many people do we have in the, use the aquifer, you know, I don't know, 30,000 or so, I don't know. How many? You know, it really weighs in
Hundreds
that.
of thousands.
Yeah, that's where I like the idea, because you really gotta protect them. I mean, I don't wanna, I mean, we're kind of between a rock and a hard spot, I don't wanna, hurt the miners, but we need data, we need information. At least I feel strongly about that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So at this point, do you think it's even worth including the mining operators in this discussion and having a workshop with the planning commission? Or do you feel like we should get more data first before we even
I
have
think
that
we
kind of?
More
get
data.
get the data, so we've got
We know
something
where
to
they're
back
coming from.
ourselves up.
Yeah, we know where they're coming from. They were pretty clear,
And it just
when we
delays
had
it.
the hearing, and
And
I agree with a lot of the stuff. I appreciate, should say, with a lot of the
Yeah.
information that they, came forward. I remember, I think it was the attorney that said, well, this is a natural resource too, and it needs to be protected. Which on a certain level, that's correct, but, how much concrete can you ingest and live, kind of things, like, we have to have water, right? If we don't have the water, taxes are an issue in the sense that if we're mitigating this so much that it increases our cost in concrete and development and infrastructure. I think if you were to weigh it against the people, would they want to have water, or they're gonna, which one? Well, they're gonna go with the water. The water's, to me, a higher priority than the concrete. So, or the sand or whatever it is in there. Yes, it does, it has a value, and we need to incorporate that into our decision-making, but, if it,
Well,
you're
you'll
gonna.
still have the water, but you'll have to
Well,
pay
have
a
the quality.
horrendous cost to treat it, that's.
So you have it both ways then. You're
Yeah.
either gonna have increase in taxes for infrastructure or cost in building and things like that, or you're gonna have it if they just
Huge
have no
increase.
standards, you're gonna pay it out the nose in water treatment.
Yeah.
So how do we balance,
So
all three?
what do we need to do? Do we need to make a motion for a moratorium, or what do we need to do?
Well, let me, I guess, at this point, let's just put a pause on that part of it. I'll follow up and see what the right avenues would be, if that is something that we wanted to move forward on. And then we could come back in our next workshop, to further discuss that. I'll work communicating with the Aquifer Protection District
Yeah,
to see.
that's important, yeah.
Yeah, and how do we put
Push. how do we
pressure on
push?
them to get it done?
Yeah.
I mean, we really need to get that done. And I don't want them sitting there, oh, great, a moratorium, that's great, have a moratorium, and then they sit back and they don't get somebody on board to handle it.
Now we don't have to come up with any money,
Yeah,
it's a moratorium.
I think my question to you is how do we put pressure on them to get this done for the county? To get an expert on board to advise us?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's gonna start with conversation. So let me reach out to them and just say the planning commission's interested in this, what's it gonna take to do it? And then we'll go from there, and I can follow up with you guys afterwards.
And when you come back to us, could you come up with a draft language for a moratorium?
We can work on something like that?
Yeah, just.
If it
yeah,
goes
just-
that way.
Just so we're moving, at least in that direction, so people know when you're talking to them.
Well, and on
And we
some
know-
level, even moving forward, we come back and we get this data. In
Mhm.
here was the responsibility that they would have to hire
Their own-
their own.
Right.
And if this gets taken care of, then actually they would not. Because here's the standards set forth by this study, this is what you have to comply with. So it's actually somewhat helping them, mitigating their costs that individually, they're
Yeah,
not
but they
having to
could,
go
they
with.
could come back and say each section or each piece that, needs to do their own study too.
Yeah, I think we still need
We've
to.
got- we've got
I think we
base.
still need to have their own study on this, because there's such a variance, like you
Yeah.
said, in the material out there. I mean, I've
But
dug
that's the whole
holes in.
point, to what
Yeah.
Lee's saying, is we get that variance information, because if we have a standard and it's based on the data, to his point also of the bias, they hire their own, they're like, oh, absolutely not, we can actually, we want a variance, because we can go through this, because our study showed this. That's why it's kind of like, you're gonna have conflicting studies, based upon the bias of,
Probably shop for
who's correct,
hydrology.
so,
And I'll guarantee you have that when you have litigation,
right.
if we don't solve these problems.
Right.
And if we solve these problems, you're gonna have a lot less litigation. And that's why I think you get that expert, and then I think we all should think about what questions do you ask the expert? I don't want, it's not only the feet, it's like, how many feet, in what areas, because again, there's different geological compositions. And there's a lot of other questions about the aquifer we're gonna have along the way, but those are some of the threshold ones to pass something like this.
So it probably would make sense then, in the event that the Aquifer Protection District has kind of identified a person then maybe we include them in this format too, so that you guys have the opportunity to prepare and ask some questions
I'd love
of
to
that
get it.
individual.
Yeah.
To get a sense as to what the study would look like, what data would come as a result, and whether that would be adequate for you guys.
If you think it'd be appropriate, Ben, I would be happy to volunteer my time to identify experts. I'm sure they're doing the same thing, but the more you get, the better.
Sure.
Because I do that all the time, and I set up interviews with them, I do it on Zoom, and everybody can ask their questions.
Yeah, if you have some names that you would like to pass on, I could
Okay,
relay that as
I'll
well.
find some.
Yeah.
I'll get some. I'll get 2 or 3 at least.
Yeah, and maybe back to your point of a draft moratorium, I'll run it by staff, but likely what I probably would want to do is either just mention this to the board before we even prepare a draft of moratorium, say, is this something that you're even interested in entertaining? If the board's not interested in entertaining it, then I don't know that there's
It's a waste
much
of money on
it. But yeah,
So you'll talk to the VOCC to even see if that's.
I'll start with staff first.
Okay,
Yeah, so-
staff, and then, assuming it goes, because if it's no, it's no, then we know we're back to this, and we'll go from there. If it's yes, then the potential is having a workshop with PUD and getting multiple hydrologists, or at least or have a pool to choose from.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks, folks. I mean, I know I'm kind of outspoken about this, but I've been managing that drinking water system for 20 years, and I know what the ramifications of all of this can really be. And you live on top of it. I've been managing a drinking water system for 20 years, and I know what'll happen if we screw that thing up.
Hate to do this, but I have to get to another meeting. Do we have?
Well, yeah, it's approaching 4 o'clock. We have data center proposals on the agenda as well. Maybe we could table that and come back to it. But I'll leave that up to your guys' decision.
Whatever, I'm good.
Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Table the data centers to next time, and so I pretty much heard from everybody except for Commissioner Voles for August and September. Mr. James, you're only available for one date, is that correct?
In August and September?
Yes.
I'll double check.
The CSN, I think you're only available on,
The third.
yes, but you're not available on the 3rd.
Well, I have someone that has more authority over me than anybody else.
Yes, you'd be in trouble.
My wife.
I'll check.
If you could double check with that, and then I'll work with staff. Pretty much, we're looking at least 1, if not 2, are gone on all the dates, so we'll just have to pick whatever I think has the most people, and go from there. Does that work? Okay. All right.
I think I'm pretty good for any.
Yeah,
any
you need to
dates
get
in
back to me too.
September.
If you need to know the dates, just let me know and I'll get them back to you. It's not every Thursday, there's only 3 of them and they're in each month.
And give me September's again.
September's is 3rd, 17th, and 24th. And August 13th is pretty much out because we already have multiple people who can't do that anyway.
So what was the other date in August?
20th or 27th, but we pretty much have
I'm out
multiple
on those
people.
dates.
And you're out on those dates. So we're looking at this point, September
Well, that's the
3rd,
fair again,
17th, or
isn't it?
24th.
That's the fair.
Yeah.
September 3rd.
Yeah,
So
not
we're-
having
so-
anything in August
Okay.
at this point, unless there's something that comes up that we need to
Okay.
deal with.
So September 3?
Well, we're finding out, we're gonna verify between
I'm pretty sure I can make that one.
these two, which ones they are or are not. So unless there's anything that comes up from staff,
I didn't catch whether or not the 10th was an option, just to let you know, both Director Bahari and I will be out of the office at that date, so.
yeah, I'm not available either.
Okay.
That's what, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so then with any announcements, anything else? Then without objection, we will adjourn at 3:48.
Thanks for the good
Oh,
discussion.
Mike just walked in.
Yeah, I made it just in time.
All right.